Well, welcome everyone. My name is Claire Britton Lang, and thank you so much for joining us. I work with Westward Whiskey, running national events, including virtual events, as you
Hear
are
me?
all experiencing. And I am super happy to be back here for our second session with Lauren Wildman, our fourth session with Whiskey Mavens this year. But I'm thrilled to introduce Lauren Wildman, who is the director of the Westward Whiskey Club. She's been with the company for about 8 years, which is like longer than the whiskey has really been around. As we all know, it takes a long time to age whiskey, so the brand itself is new to some people, and I think new to some of you. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Lauren. You're going to taste through three samples, two of which are going to be really fun and surprising, I hope. You should also have a little vial of barley that you received that you should feel free to open and taste when you're tasting the whiskey, because that's what our whiskey comes from, as well as a chocolate bar from our partners at Woodblock Chocolate that is made using our spent grain. We like to try to reuse stuff, so we partner with them to make our malted barley chocolate, and that can be tasted at any point during the tasting. So with that, I will hand it off to Lauren, and she's going to talk you through Westward American Single Malt, our newest offering, and the Westward Whiskey Club.
Thank you, Claire. So I'm Lauren Wildman. I'm the director of the club at Westward. And like she was saying, I've been with the company for a long time and kind of have seen our single malt grow up and really come into its own. So it's really exciting to share this with you today, especially knowing that some of you have never tried Westward before. At Westward, we are located right in the heart of Portland, Oregon. So we're in the central east side, right alongside the Willamette River. And we make every single batch of whiskey right from that location by hand from scratch. So we do bring in 100% two-row malted barley because we're using a single grain and producing it entirely ourselves from scratch. That's what defines us as a single malt. American single malt is, a newly designated category. It's in the final step of being designated by the TTB as an official category of American whiskey, but it's certainly a new category. Even in the years that I've worked with Westward, the number one question we get in our distillery and our tasting rooms is, wait, so this is bourbon? How is this not Scotch? Like, people are very confused about what it is. Most people ask us why we don't make bourbon, which is probably the biggest question, being that, bourbon is definitely a whiskey that is, an American whiskey. And we don't make bourbon because we live in the American Northwest, where barley is king. We grow a lot of barley in this region. We have one of the largest malting facilities in the American Northwest, just across the Columbia River from us in Vancouver, Washington. And Great Western Malting produces all of the malt that you'd see in any beers produced on the West Coast. And so we're really excited to have this really beautiful, abundant resource right here in our own backyard. And so we do source it locally. It's all, like I said, two-row pale malt. We bring that into the distillery, about 1 million pounds a year. There is 4 pounds of the malt that's in that vial in just one bottle of Westward American single malt. So we go through a lot of malt. We actually mill it in-house, and we have a brewing facility there where we add ale yeast, which is not typical in whiskey distillation, right? So we're using the Chico strain, which is 001. It's the same yeast strain that they use to make Sierra Nevada. And we make a really beautiful, strong golden ale. We make a beer that you'd actually want to drink before we even start distillation. There are no hops in the beer, but there is all of that really beautiful barley and, of course, that ale yeast. I like to joke that Westward only has 5 ingredients. It's 100% two-row malted barley, ale yeast, water, oak, and thyme. And like we were joking earlier, maybe a little magic in there. So we really are doing a very traditional process when we make our whiskey, but we're doing it in a way that maybe isn't very traditional with this ale yeast. It's also not very efficient to make whiskey this way, but the reason we do it is because it develops a lot more flavor and aroma that you can't capture from the grains themselves or through maturation time in American oak barrels. So that long, slow fermentation process is where we're going to develop a lot of flavor, a lot of aroma, things like stone fruit and floral notes and green apple, these fruity and spicy flavors and these floral notes and aromas, they're only coming to fruition in the whiskey because of that long, slow fermentation. So I do encourage you to taste some of that barley that you have. For me, it tastes almost exactly like grape nuts. It's crispy, crunchy, and delicious. And I really wish that every bar that served Westward would serve me a side of that. That's like the best bar snack. I like to snack on it while I'm drinking my Westward. It's also a nice way to cleanse your palate in between tastes. And so what we have here in front of us is the original Western American single malt here with the teal label. And this is, like I said, the kind of base for everything else that we do. Once we've made that beautiful, tasty beer, we actually twice pot distill this through 2 low reflux pot stills. A low reflux still is going to basically bring more flavor over as the whiskey isn't condensing as much within the still. So we're going to get a lot more flavor and a lot more aroma pulled through to the finished whiskey. And then that goes into brand new American white oak barrels. We do use brand new American oak for Westward. Every single batch of White Dog goes into a brand new cask, just like you see with American bourbon. The main difference between what we use versus what you'd see at a typical bourbon distillery is our barrels are really lightly toasted. We only use about a 2, maybe a 3 level char on the interior of those casks. We don't want the barrels to be so heavily charred that that charcoal is actually removing aroma and flavor from the product. We want it to complement the whiskey. So when you taste Westward, you should really taste first barley and then beer, and then of course barrel, all in balance together. So you should taste all of the components. And if we had a barrel that was a little bit darker char, you would lose a lot of the flavors and aromas that we work so hard to develop in that brewery. So you lose a lot of that brightness, those fruit tones with too much char on the cask. So I think that it's a great opportunity now to taste the original American single malt.
Okay, so the order is going to start the original, and then
Yes.
what's the order kind of these 3 that we're doing?
So after we tasted the original, we're going to do the mystery unlabeled lighter colored spirit, and then we'll go into the single barrel. Hello, friend. Sorry, your little one just popped up.
Oh, yeah.
Future whiskey drinker. Okay.
Oh, yeah, they get to taste a little bit of it each time.
My 6-year-old, I'm pretty sure she knows how Westward's made start to finish just from hearing me talk about it so much for so many years.
He picks up, surprisingly, both of them pick up flavors that I don't. They're like, it tastes like chocolate, white chocolate. I'm like, okay.
What's interesting, because we all pull from our own sensory experiences, right? From your sense memories, from your flavor memories. And, so people always tell me like, well, I don't really smell this, this tasting note that you're describing here in the aroma section, or I get a totally different flavor profile than what's listed here. And that's completely accurate. I mean, that's right. There's no wrong answer when you're tasting a whiskey, right? The flavors that you perceive are true to you and your experiences. So everybody's going to get a little bit something different when they nose a glass for the first time or taste something new.
Yeah. You definitely get that beer mash smell to it.
You get a lot of that maltiness, right? Like the sweetness, the natural sweetness from the barley malt itself comes through on this, but I still get some brightness. I get some like green apple, definitely some subtle floral notes on the nose, or like jasmine, like really light floral.
See, I get a pear, that nice pear instead of an apple. I get that pear.
See, I must confess, I'm.
So this does kind of straddle the line. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that I'm a novice when it comes to whiskey tasting, and so it's fantastic. But I think for me, what I get is toasted barley, if you will. That's coming across strong for me, and I think that's differentiating it with other whiskeys that I've had. So great job.
Yeah, do one thing. If you try and pair it with the chocolate here, oh man, it'll change your
try that.
First, put some chocolate in your mouth, and then
the fat actually carries flavor, right? So that's one of the reasons that we love to have chocolate with whiskey and even with wine, is the fats that are in that chocolate that actually help carry those flavors across your palate more effectively, and then you get even a longer finish as well. So it should really complement the flavor of the whiskey and allow you to have a longer finish. And it's just, like you said, it's just delicious. So why not enjoy it as we go?
That's what I do with my barbecue. I pair it with barbecue. Same thing.
That equals flavor.
Julius here makes barbecue rub with the char from the barrels, whiskey barrels.
Yeah, we actually sell our used barrel staves for smoking, and they're very popular in our tasting rooms. You know, I've shared some with some local chef friends and things like that, and I love when I get like, you know, whiskey smoked bacon back as a gift when I give someone some barrel pieces.
If you guys are open, if you ever want to send me the shaving of your barrel inside, that's how I make my rubs, and I can make a distinct rub for you guys specifically of your own barrel. So
wow, that would be so cool. Yeah, no, we definitely need to connect on that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I totally would love to do it.
I was just going to say, you know, as we talked a little bit about American single malt and Westward in particular, you know, it does kind of straddle the line between Scotch and bourbon, which is why I think it really does appeal to a wide audience. You know, the mash bill is straight up a Highland Scotch, right? We're using a pale malt. There's no peat involved here. So it is going to be very similar to that. And then, of course, the aging is very similar to bourbon. So we do kind of have a bolder, more robust whiskey than, which appeals to the American palate, but then that maltier quality definitely appeals to a broader audience. So it's really nice as like an entry level whiskey, especially for people who don't generally drink whiskey. I find that Westward is a great entry level pour for someone who's a novice and just getting into whiskey, because it does have such a beautiful flavor and it isn't super sharp or aggressive. Like, while it's definitely, like I said, it's bold. I mean, this is 45%, this is 90 proof, but it's definitely smooth and soft and round on your palate. What are you guys thinking so far?
Very sweet. I'm surprised how sweet it is for the percentage, but I love it.
Awesome.
And
so as we continue to enjoy,
chocolate definitely enhances it.
I get a lot of chocolate always. Every time I have Westward, the first thing I get is a lot of chocolatey mouthfeel. I don't know. In England, you get something which is orange coated chocolate. That's what
that is.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure that out. Like, what's that? Because I get a citrus. It is that orange citrus finish that's in the back end. And it's a little bit of smoky. You get that oak in the back. But I guess I'm a peat head, so I'll find that smokiness in there because I love
You'll find it. You'll seek it out.
Now, do you guys ever look at doing? I know it's a single malt, but do you ever do because I know when I looked at your website, you don't have necessarily old barrels because it's all just new oak, American oak. Do you ever looking at doing used, like the whole Scottish tradition of using used barrels at all?
You know, it's not something that we've really considered doing to date. You know, I think part of the reason that when we founded Westward and really were conceptualizing the whiskey that we wanted to make, we wanted to do something that was different than what everybody else was doing. You know, we're like, we're not going to compete with Scotland, Ireland, even Japanese whiskey. Like, we're not trying to. We're not trying to compete with bourbon. That's just not who we are. So we decided that we wanted to make something that was unique to the region that we're in and really pull from the resources that are around us. You know, it's kind of kitschy and cute, but the barrels that we purchase are all from the Southern Ozarks. And so they actually the trees are growing and those casks are, you know, being cured and produced at the beginning of the Oregon Trail. And then they mature in Clackamas, where our barrel warehouse is, which is the end of the Oregon Trail. So this idea of like that pioneer spirit going westward, that westward expansion and creating something new and different and kind of scoffing maybe a little bit at tradition and be more experiential with how we approach whiskey is true to what our philosophy is.
Here's a thought, and a local place did it, was your own barrels that you do, take them to a brewer or your own brewery, do your beer, and then come back with it and do another of your own. So it's like a full circle.
That's exactly what we've done. So, you know, we created the product that you're tasting right now. This was our original whiskey, you know, like that core product. And then we said, how do we expand on this, but staying true to who we are and where we are? So the first barrel that we ever passed along was actually to a local brewery called Migration. Our head distiller and head blender, Miles Monroe, used to brew at Migration prior to working with Westward. And so he gifted them this barrel that we've now named the Heritage Barrel. And they aged a stout beer in it and gave the barrel back to us. And so then we, of course, put Westward back into that stout barrel.
That's the stout. Is that the stout? Nice.
So the stout cask was our very first ever cask finish that was released to the world. We did like a single barrel of it. It was so wildly popular that we said, okay, how many other brewery friends do we have? Let's send out as many empty Westward casks to breweries to age stout beer in. Now we have over 30, maybe 40 brewery partners that use Westward casks to age their stouts. We get those barrels back, and then we now create a mingle of all these different local stout producers to create the Westward stout cask finish.
That's amazing. I didn't know that it was your own barrel with the stout.
Yeah, they started as our barrels, then get sent to them, and then back to us. With the heritage barrel, we actually went even further. After we pulled out that very first ever stout cask, which we called M1, we gave the barrel back to Migration, and Migration aged a porter in it, gave the barrel back to us. We aged whiskey in again and had a porter finish. And then we sent the barrel to Oregon's only cooperage, Oregon Barrel Works, and they scrape the barrel, they recharred it, and now it is back in our hands, and we will continue to age Westward and Migration beers in it.
Oh
and
God.
basically until the wheels fall off. Like, we're going to just keep trading that barrel back and forth as long as we can. We've also done some really
a brewery in Orange County. They do the same thing, and they just keep doing what you're doing with the brewery. That's amazing. That's awesome.
Who knows? Eventually, these barrels might end up in Scotland, so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I've missed it, but how long is it aged for? The one that I'm drinking right now, the teal one?
We don't have an age statement on any of our products. For us, an age statement is not what defines a quality whiskey. So it's aged to taste. I can't tell you exactly how old this is because it's a mingle of several different barrels at different age ranges. I can tell you that the youngest casks that we ever mingle are at 3 years, and the oldest around 8. Our sweet spot's really like 5 to 6 years. We did just release a new whiskey for our whiskey club just this last week, and that was our oldest single barrel to date at 9 years.
Okay.
But we're like 5, 6 years. We'll use a little bit of 3 year to keep things bright, keep those fruit tones really present on the whiskey. But we've definitely found that much longer than 8, 9 years at this point, we start to lose a lot of that. Like I said, those fruit and floral tones, those spice notes that we worked so hard in the brewery to achieve. And so we like a younger whiskey. It's just brighter, it's bolder, and it's more flavorful.
You're blending a couple different years to get that same profile for your main one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a Scotch kind of thing. You're trying to keep that same.
Right. We're trying to keep the flavor profile consistent for each one of our kind of core, products.
Yeah.
That being said, we love to experiment and play around with things and do some really funky stuff for our single barrel program and for our whiskey club. So while we want consistency when it comes to our core range, we love obscure, random other selections that come out for our whiskey club. It's kind of our opportunity to play around and to work with new partners and collaborate on new ideas. And then when something is successful through the whiskey club is generally when it becomes a more permanent product for us, like the Pinot Noir cask, right? And the stout cask. Both of those started out as one-off single barrel releases. And when we knew that we were onto something, we expanded the program. So we've worked with a lot of different wineries over the years. The very first Pinot cask came out, I think, in 2019 as a single barrel. And then immediately we said, okay, how many wineries want to gift us, or how many barrels can we buy from Willamette Valley wineries? And again, we talked a little bit about, sherry casks and port casks and those types of expressions that you see in single malt whiskey. But we look to our own backyard. We don't have a lot of port producers in Oregon, right? Yeah. So for us, it was like, okay, let's see what is big here. And of course, Pinot Noir is definitely the varietal that we grow the most of and have the most recognition for here in Oregon. And so that's why we decided to do a Pinot cask first, but we didn't limit it to that. So we've done a Tempranillo cask finish. Our next couple release is going to be a Chardonnay cask out of the Russian River Valley. So lots of different wine finishes. We've actually done our version of a port cask as well. Instead, we worked with a local winery called Dobbs Family Estate, and they have a series they call Untethered, where they also experiment and do some funky stuff. So they took an ex-tequila barrel and they aged a dessert-style Pinot Noir rosé in that barrel, and then we put Westward into it and aged that to give us kind of this kind of fortified sweet wine finish on our whiskey. Because that cask held tequila initially, it wasn't overly sweet, wasn't too cloying. It was really herbaceous and really different. And I think the spirit cask is really what kept it more grounded and didn't become too sweet from that dessert wine that was held in there previously.
Do you still have that bottle or no?
I actually just looked at my inventory today. There are 197 bottles left of the Dobbs Pinot Noir Rosé in my library, and those will be released exclusively to our club members.
Can be a club
in
member.
December. That one's really cool. It's really bizarre.
Oh yeah,
Do you guys ever thought of doing? And I've other distillery, one distillery particularly. I won't say a name because you guys are you. But they've actually got to do a barrel of their own wood within local region.
Ah, okay. So the Garyana oak, Oregon white oak.
Mm-hmm.
We have experienced that too. We've experimented with Garyana. We don't love what it did for Westward. It's probably the one experiment that will never be bottled.
Really?
In and of itself. We've used a small amount of it in a club release this year, but the Garyana just overtook the signature flavors of Westward. And it's still delicious. I mean, I love it when I was able to taste it from the cask. It has a lot more like raisinated fruit quality. It's much darker and really interesting whiskey. It just doesn't taste like Westward right off the bat. So what we ended up doing is we actually looked to terroir and the terroir of growing barley and how can we, again, look to our region. And so we created something we called Elements, and we sourced full pint barley from Klamath Basin. And this barley was developed at the local university to be the premier barley for beer making. We were the first people to ever make a large quantity of beer with that malt. And so we took the full pint and we made one single batch of whiskey with that. And then that was aged in brand new American white oak. Then we made a separate batch of whiskey using malt that was grown out in the high desert. So a very different climate from the fertile valley floor. Mm-hmm. And the Mecca Grade Estate malt was aged in a Garyana oak. So we incorporated some of the high desert Mecca Grade Estate Garyana batch in with this Oregon-centric full pint malt, and that became the Elements release, which came out to our members this year.
That's nice. I gotta be unfortunately, I could be a member, but I'm in Utah. They don't ship in Utah, so that's
Utah. You guys got it rough out there. I'm not gonna lie.
We do. I gotta go outside the state to get stuff.
You can always fly out to Portland. You don't even have to leave the airport. We have a tasting room at the airport if you ever find yourself in PDX, and then you don't even have to deal with security.
I would drive, and probably my son will have a soccer tournament there, so I will definitely be popping by.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, our club members can pick up from the distillery. We do have club members that live in states that we can't ship to, and we are happy to hold on to that whiskey as long as it needs to be held on to. I mean, I actually had one of our club members recently pick up every release that he's ordered to date. He's been a member since the very beginning and had never received a bottle. He drove to Oregon and picked up all of his whiskey at once and felt like Christmas. And I was also, this is a real person, like you actually exist, because I've been selling you whiskey for years and you've never drank any of it. I just didn't realize, like, for me, I'd be like, I want this whiskey. I need to come get it. But he waited years to come get it.
Do you ship Pennsylvania or Maryland?
We do ship to Pennsylvania. We do ship to Pennsylvania. There's a handful of states that are challenging for us right now, so that's why I'm hesitant to confirm like 100% because I keep getting updated lists from our fulfillment partner. We actually, from Oregon directly can't ship direct to consumer. That's one of our state regulations. So we fulfill our club orders within the state of Oregon, and then we work with a separate fulfillment partner based out of California, and they do the fulfillment for the rest of our club. There's about 30 states that we can ship to within the U.S. I missed that, sorry.
How much is it to be in the club?
There are no membership dues. There is no cost to join. It is free and flexible. I am a huge advocate of having complete control about what I want, how much I want to spend, and all those other things. I'm a member of some wine clubs, and this is kind of where the club idea came from, this quarterly cadence of shipments of different unique products. But one of my big complaints about some of the wine clubs that I'm in is they're not customizable. So automatically they're gonna select the wine that they want to sell me, and I don't have a choice in whether or not I want those bottles, if I want to switch things up, if I want to order different varietals. And so I feel a little bit like stuck in that situation. And so when I developed the Westward Club, for me, it was important to have complete flexibility and control about what you're ordering. So each quarter we send out an email that announces the next special release. you usually have about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks from that point to customize your shipment. So you could add on additional bottles. You could swap out the current special release for a past release or for one of our core products, or you can skip a release altogether and there's no penalty for that. You just have to take action, and then your card will automatically be processed according to the details in that initial email. And so it's really like you could totally be hands off and let it just run its course. Every quarter you'll get something different and exciting and new to try. Or you can take ownership and every quarter you can log in and you can purchase exactly what you want or nothing at all. I think for me that's really important to have that kind of flexibility when it comes to purchasing, because obviously not all of us drink whiskey as fast as I do. And so we have 2 tiers, kind of 2 levels of commitment. We have an expedition club, which receives 1 bottle per quarter, but 4 bottles of whiskey does not get me through a year. So we also have our Founders Club tier, which receives 3 bottles per quarter. And again, you're only paying for the cost of the whiskey. As an expedition member, you're paying about $100 each quarter. And then as a Founders Club member, it would be triple that, so $300 per quarter.
Do you have experimental sherry barrels in the process right now?
We definitely do. It's funny that you bring that up, because I just did our selects for 2023, and we'll be releasing more new expressions to our club than ever before. So in addition to the 4 quarterly shipments that we do, the 4 unique specialty releases each year, we've peppered in a few optional releases. Sometimes we don't have enough quantity of one particular experiment that we've done to fulfill the entire club. And so what we'll do is we'll essentially take this one single cask, or even half barrel sometimes, and we will present that to our club as an optional buy. And we do that a couple of times a year, where you actually have to log into your account and gain access and purchase before it sells out, which is like the wheat wine cask that I was mentioning earlier, that 9-year cask. And our Founders Club members typically get 3 of the same each quarter. However, in February, we switched it up for them, and we gave them 2 bottles of a chocolate malted rye whiskey and then 1 bottle of a Kavatica stout whiskey. The Kavatica Stout was actually a local brewery called Fort George. They're only distributed in the Pacific Northwest. They make really amazing beers out on the Oregon coast in Astoria. And Dave Coyne, who was their head brewer at the time, came to Westward, and he made their flagship stout, which is called Kavatica, in our brewery. We completely mirrored the recipe. We did include hops in that as well, not the full quantity that they use at Fort George, but we did, put a fair amount of hops in there, and then we distilled their beer into whiskeys. We actually distilled a stout beer opposed to the golden ale that we're typically doing. And so that brewery series has also really taken off. We've cloned a lot of different beer recipes and then turned those into whiskey for our club. And because we saw so much popularity with these 2 separate releases, for 2023, my goal is to have 2 separate releases for each quarter. So our Founders Club members will have some diversity in each shipment, and then it'll also give our expedition members an opportunity to either swap out and pick the one that they are most excited about, or order both. And so I'm really excited to let you know that we are going to be doing a sherry cask in 2023.
And Lauren, I don't want to rush you, but I think maybe we should move on to the next.
Move on. Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yeah, let's reveal. Let's do a big reveal on the
Okay, so the next thing that we're gonna the unlabeled bottle. The next thing we're gonna taste actually isn't whiskey at all. We're gonna be tasting some Guatemalan rum. And I know you're thinking that's totally obscure. Why are we drinking rum right now? But this is a Guatemalan rum called Casa Magdalena. And we made this with our partners, the Leal family. Our founder, Thomas Mooney, is from Guatemala, and he is longtime family friends with a sugarcane producer out in Guatemala. So the Leals first invested in Westward, and they helped get Westward off the ground. And then they came to us and said, will you help us make a rum in Guatemala? But we want to make it the Westward way. So we want to use the highest quality local ingredients. Of course, we own a sugarcane plantation, so we want to use our cane. And then we actually distilled this in Guatemala. We shipped it to Portland and then barrel aged it in ex-bourbon barrels right alongside Westward. I talked about the Westward way. We use 100% two-row, all locally grown malt. For the Casa Magdalena, we use Miapa, which is grade A molasses. Most rum is made from blackstrap, made from grade D molasses. So again, this is much more similar in flavor to like honey when you're tasting that grade A molasses. And then they developed a yeast strain that actually cultivates on the back of pineapple skins, did a long, slow, cool fermentation, just like we do with Westward. And then because we're barrel aging it, in American oak. You get a lot of really beautiful flavors there. A little bit of caramel, kind of like toasted sugar, bananas foster. I get a lot of tropical fruit on this. Even some like grassiness and herbaceous quality that you might see in like more of an agricole style of rum. Because
you barreled it, but there's no color.
There's a subtle amount of color. You probably can't see in that little bottle, but you might be able to see in mine here that it's got this kind of yellow tint to it. Yeah. It is a white rum. We are marketing it as a Ron Blanco, but it has been aged for a little over a year in those ex-bourbon barrels, and they are used casks, so they're not going to give as much color as a brand new cask would. Oh man, Magdalena.
What is that rum?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What's the proof on that rum?
The proof on this rum is just a tick lower than when we were drinking. This is 41.2.
Okay. Nice. It was good. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
And the reason that we're tasting rum right now is because this is the rum that seasoned the cask for the next pour that you're tasting. So we're really getting to kind of see the original expression here. And then the rum that was in the barrels, because this grew up alongside Westward and aged right in the same barrel warehouse as our whiskey is aged. When we emptied the barrels from Casa Magdalena, of course, we filled them with single malt. That's what we do. So this is our latest club release. This is the Westward American single malt rum cask, aged in the Casa Magdalena barrels. This is higher in proof than the first pour. This is at 50%, 100 proof. When we're selecting proofs for our whiskey, it's always about aroma and flavor. So we do have cask strength releases as well. Our cask strength is 125 proof, 62.5%. You know, and so when we're deciding what proof a whiskey should be, it really is, what is this drink best at? Which is also why we have our whiskey at 45% instead of a typical 40%, because we do think it stands up to that proof.
Or I didn't get the rum. What was the proof on the rum?
The proof on the rum is 41.25%.
Oh yeah, you went all little Pacific there. You don't find that particular number like I want it 41.2. That's
exactly. You don't land on that by accident.
No, it was like you tasted that and they're like, okay, there it is. We're keeping it there.
I also love the fact that because our whiskey is a little higher in proof, you know, if I do want to throw an ice cube in here or something, it doesn't become too diluted. You know, it's one of my big complaints, especially when I order whiskey out. You know, if it comes in a glass that's slightly warmed or the ice cubes are already kind of like sweaty, melty from being in the ice well, immediately the whiskey is watered down and you lose all of that aroma and flavor and that nuance for what you're spending your good hard-earned money on this delicious pour whiskey. And I mean, I definitely prefer my whiskey neat, but I do like that I can add a single cube to Westward. It can sit, it can dilute, and it still has a ton of bold flavor because it's not going to cool down below 40.
I think you guys you need to invest in rocks, actual rocks.
Yes, but like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like the whiskey stones, that keep your whiskey cold, but don't add any water to it. Yeah, I like the sphere molds right now. It's kind of my jam because the sphere has less surface area than a big cube. So it does dilute a little bit more slowly in the glass. Mm-hmm. Plus, it's really fun to play with. I don't know. Big, beautiful round ball of ice.
Making those is a pain, actually. The sphere rice.
I do with a glass that has like the slant to it, so it eases into the water into it. So you still get like that split. So you're not.
So there's enough whiskey at the bottom that isn't being in full contact.
Exactly. So you're getting the coolness, but you're not actually getting the water. It's a glass that has like a wedge that has it like that. So it's like a wedge. That's
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've already jumped ahead to pour myself some rum cask, and I hope that you have as well. Yeah. So for me, this is. Go ahead.
I think it's a nice segue from white rum into the rum cask.
I like being able to kind of pick up the flavors of the rum in the whiskey in the same way that when I taste that barley malt, I'm looking to pick up those flavors in our whiskey. You know, so when we do a tour at our facility, you taste the grain, you taste the beer, you taste the white dog before you ever even taste our original American single malt. So you're kind of learning throughout the process where each individual flavor comes from, what's coming from the raw materials, from the grain, what's coming through from the fermentation, and then what ultimately does the barrel maturation do to that white husk.
Do you guys have any
Did a great
rum
job on
aging
that.
right now?
Do we have any what aging?
Rum.
Rum?
Yes. Okay. Because that would be something that I would consider doing a barrel pick of, because if you could bottle like a single barrel pick of rum at cask strength rum goes really well with a cigar, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like that's it doesn't get much better than cask strength rum with a cigar.
You know, and that's honestly why we kept this at 100 proof too. We felt like the rum
Yeah.
cask finish was so beautiful
Yeah.
at a higher proof that it didn't need the additional water to soften those edges. That sweetness, those tropical fruit tones are really lovely at this proof.
Yeah, like I drink rum occasionally. Like 8 times out of 10, I drink Scotch or bourbon or American single malt, and then 2 times out of 10, I'll drink rum. There's only 180 proof rum that I drink that I like. Everything else is 100 proof or higher for rum, because that's where it's at for rum, in my opinion.
Yeah, we did a single barrel for a tiki bar out in Sacramento, California, a couple of years ago, and we did it in the Añejo version of the Casa Magdalena. It was the only time we'd ever released an Añejo, but I know that we still have a ton of casks of rum aging at the rack house. The intent is to have the Westward American single malt rum cask join the full portfolio. Hopefully in 2023, this will be more readily available. Currently, it is exclusive to our club members. There is some left still to purchase. This came out in August of this year, but there are a few hundred bottles left. And then once it's sold out, we'll have to wait for it to hit the national market and be distributed as a new product for us.
So undisclosed 6-year-old review. Chocolate, coffee, and it has a doggy food smell.
I love it.
My thing is, this is like a great breakfast whiskey.
A great breakfast whiskey? That's so funny that you say that. The first time I tasted the rum cask years ago was a different rum cask that we released in different barrels. I mean, totally different rum. And I was like, this is like the breakfast of champions. It smells like pancakes and maple syrup. Like it was all these delicious breakfast notes for me. Here I get a lot of like caramelized sugar, but in a way that's like a baked good, like almost like a fortune cookie or like a really good waffle cone. And then on the end, I'm getting these really great citrus notes. You know, I do get a lot of like tangerine on the finish.
Yeah. So the rum cask, do you have any idea what those were at before you watered them down to 100 proof? Like, are they 105, 110, 115 proof?
Well, the beauty of aging whiskey in the American Northwest is we have the ideal climate for barrel aging. You think about other places that are famous whiskey regions, and the weather there tends to be more consistent throughout the year. So you're going to see more precipitation or more humidity or more temperate weather, where you don't see a lot of variance in heat and not a lot of variance in the moisture content in the air. And Portland is the exact opposite of that. We have 4 very distinct seasons. What's unique about Portland summers is they're really hot and super dry. We don't have really any humidity, which I personally love because I don't do well in the heat. I'm Canadian, so for me, it's not my jam. But so these really hot, dry summers, the whiskey, expands within those casks and it pushes itself really deep into those oak barrels. And then in the winter months, when we have a ton of cool weather and a ton of rain, everything kind of goes dormant, right? It contracts and it settles in and it mellows down. And then again, when it warms up, we see this expansion again. And then because it's really active within those barrels, we tend to see not only our barrels age more quickly, but also we have more water loss than alcohol loss, which is kind of unique to our region. So the whiskey goes into barrel at 125, and oftentimes it'll come out of cask higher in proof. 130, 132, somewhere around there.
And
God, this is a beautiful breakfast whiskey. This is.
This
I wish I
has
could.
been my like summer sipper, you know, as we have this beautiful Indian summer happening and these, you know, still warm days in the beginning of October. I have been taking this outside at the end of the night and just sitting in the warm air and enjoying this. To me, it's like the best summer whiskey because it does have so much tropical fruit on it. But yeah, I would definitely do this on Sunday morning for breakfast too.
I would add that to a coffee or to a espresso. Just put a little shot in that.
So good.
With coffee, this is going to be a killer. I mean,
It's 5 o'clock.
So I'm happy to talk more about.
I said it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Also, Westward makes a very tasty espresso martini. And
yeah, it does.
We've seen a lot of those. Espresso martinis are very popular right now, but a lot of the venues that we work with for some of our events, in particular the library events that we've been talking about, love to have an espresso martini as like one of the cocktails on there. Especially,
and I will say the espresso martini last night at the LA library event was hands down my favorite cocktail of the evening. And I love, you know, coffee with our whiskey, but sometimes I feel like it can overwhelm the flavors of Westward a little bit. But this was so perfectly balanced, and it had just enough citrus oil on there that it was just decadent and delicious. One of the first cocktails we would make at the distillery in the early days, we used to call the reverse revolver, which is essentially whiskey. We make a coffee liqueur and orange oil. And it was just like the best after dinner or early morning cocktail.
Nice.
Like 2 parts whiskey, 1 part coffee liqueur, and a nice little squeeze of orange peel, and you are good to go.
This needs to be an ice cream. There's a Far's ice cream that's here in Ogden locally that do a coffee, and I'm like, just add this whiskey to that. Perfect. I'm an ice
like,
cream.
I want to turn this into like a caramel and dump it over ice cream.
Yeah.
Lauren, one more thing, I guess. I know we're maybe getting close to the end. You can tell us when we're ready to wrap up. But I think in what I've seen in the past couple of months of doing events is people get really into some of our nerdier Whiskey Club releases. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about some of the weirder things that Christian and Miles have done?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, like I said, we established the club in 2019, and every release to date has been something unique and different from past releases, with the exception of the Tempranillo cask, which we have refilled that punch in, working with Dominio 4 Winery. But we've done some really crazy, obscure stuff, and we're not stopping anytime soon. I think one of the most popular whiskeys we've done to date is our sourdough whiskey. So we work with Ken Forkish, who's a James Beard award-winning baker and amazing producer of sourdough breads. And he's good longtime friends with Christian Krogstad, who's our founder. And as the story goes, Christian and Ken were drinking whiskey one night, surprise, surprise. And Ken challenged Christian. He said, I bet you can't make whiskey with my sourdough starter. And like any good drunken bet, Christian's like, watch me, let me do it. I bet you I can. And so later that week, Ken shows up at the brewery with a nice big Cambro of sourdough starter, and we used it instead of ale yeast to make our wash. And my initial reaction was, this is going to be terrible, just based on the aroma in the brewery. It was real funky. And so we distilled it, and I got to taste what we called sour dog, right? Our sourdough white dog whiskey. And I thought it was concentrated terrible. I mean, it just, all the smells that I was getting in the brewery were just now concentrated into something that I didn't think tasted good at all. And then we were hosting a club event out at our rack house, and I tasted it at 2 years, and I was weak in the knees. Like, it was incredible. And so we released that sourdough whiskey in August of 2020, probably one of our most popular whiskeys to date. Our club members fell in love with it. And so we have already put into the works to make more of that sourdough whiskey. And that will come out to our club members in 2023, with the eventual goal of hopefully having it join the permanent core range as an additional expression of Westward whiskey in the future. Like I said, we experiment with a lot of different beer yeasts, right? We use that Chico strain, but we've done a Belgian Ardennes yeast from wild yeast. We've done a German Hefeweizen whiskey that we partnered with Widmer for. We have done lots of different wine finishes. I mentioned the Pinot Noir Rosé, the Tempranillo cask, the Chardonnay cask, which is coming out in November. And so the other things that we do, again, I talked about these 5 ingredients, right? The yeast being one of them. So switching out the yeast strain is one way that we experiment. Switching out the cask and doing these different barrel finishes is another way that we experiment. Or, of course, the mash bill. So we have a 2 malt series where we use other grains in addition to the 2-row pale malt. We've used malted rye. We've used soft white winter wheat, so malted wheat. We've used chocolate malted rye. We've done like these different cloned beer recipes. So lots of different fun things in the past and as well as the future. We have some whiskey aging in mezcal barrels right now that I'm really excited to release. We have some Sauterne finish. There's a lot of interesting, fun things coming up. We've also used Hungarian oak as well. So essentially every quarterly release that you're going to get is something that you've never had before, which, and while it's sad when you get down to the bottom and you think, oh, there's no more of this and there's never going to be more of it, just know that, you know, in a couple of months' time, there'll be another exciting whiskey to try. And for me, we're only getting better. I mean, I have some personal favorites over the years, the sourdough being one of them. Our Bridgeport Kingpin, which had 32% malted rye, was also one of my favorites. I love what rye does for Westward, but I'm never disappointed when I get a new club release. And to me, it seems like we're only getting better each time. The rum cask for me is no exception there. I absolutely love this whiskey and cannot wait to drink more of it.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions? Because it's pretty much time to wrap up. Nitin, you haven't put in your word yet. Do you have anything to say or ask?
No, actually, I put it in comments, what I was feeling about the whiskey. So I'm not an expert, as you know, Sarup mentioned, but I've tasted a lot of Scotch whiskeys. My favorite one is Highland Park, but I was pleasantly surprised with the first one that I tasted. It was pretty good. The single malt one, the single barrel one, sorry, obviously is a little stronger on the to taste, and I felt like a peatish tinge to it. It was not exactly peatish, but it had a peatish tinge. I loved it. The rum was a pleasant surprise as well. So overall, I'm pretty happy to being introduced to the American single malts. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a
Thank you so much for
beautiful
saying that.
category, and soon it's going to be a TTB recognized category. So maybe in a month from now, it will have a category of its own. So Swaroop, now you can look outside of Scotch and serve the Binny Isle for Westward.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And thanks so much, and Lauren, fantastic introduction. I'm just impressed with the way you guys are experimenting things. I'm certainly curious now, and I do want to try out stuff. The pineapple rum, although it was something that you did as an experimentation with a partner, I'm impressed. I've never sipped on rum. I've always mixed it with Coke, but I was very
Right.
nice to have that as well. So great stuff. You have piqued my curiosity. I'm looking forward to trying out stuff even more just because of
Oh,
this event.
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I thank you all for
And
joining tonight. And
Lauren, if it helps, Swaroop is a fellow Canadian. I mean, he's
oh, that
for
always
you,
helps.
he's a
Used to
Canadian.
be. Back now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
really
yeah,
appreciate
so
y'all
I
joining
think
tonight and kind of digging into American single malt with us and tasting through Westward. And I'm glad that you all enjoyed it. And again, we're here for you. So if you have any questions about the Whiskey Club or about American single malt or anything at all, we're here for you. So reach out, find us on the website. You can email me directly as well, Lauren@westwardwhiskey.com. And I'm happy to, help you get signed up for the club or help you get that special bottle of whiskey that you've been eyeing on the website home to you.
no, yeah, okay.